Hello and welcome to another Gameplay Monday video, and today we are looking at Kindred. We haven't seen a video of Kindred on my channel in a while. They are still in a good state, not exactly OP anymore, but definitely still a strong pick overall. And against them is Lee Sin, and all Kindreds know Lee Sins can be quite annoying. Even if you can beat them, the kick out of ultimate is actually something quite frustrating. And should a Lee Sin have lane priority over your team, the invades will become fast and quick and you won't get any marks whatsoever. And the focus on this gameplay is your decision making in the early game, but also a lot of emphasis on mid-game decision making, how you transition those towers and other gold leads across the map and try and take hold of the game, or in the other case, how you hold off and try and come back into it. As usual with these videos, both junglers do a good job at their respective play styles and impacting the game in a good way, and that all begins with how they start the early game pathing. So as all Kindred mains know, you have the split of the Scuttle Crab for the early marks, and most of the time you will mark the enemy jungler first. So in this case, Kindred starts on the red side, which is of course on the top end, and please mid laners note, the Lissandra on Kindred's team gets chunked by the enemy Syndra, all for trying to get down that ward in the river. Why is that important? Well, you can see Lee Sin going for the Scuttle Crab mark if it does spawn on that side, or if he heads in that direction, and those early river wards are really becoming basically a meta decision in the higher MMRs, and I recommend most of you do it. Even if your laners don't do it as a jungler, get that ward down on the river, keep track of the enemy jungler around that level 3 area, and you can use that information to get leads of your own. And in this case, because the Lee Sin started on the blue, went to Gromp and then the topside Scuttle to sort of play the cards and try either contest Kindred there or just secure that side of the map, and the fact that Kindred started red and is now heading down to the bottom side, Lee Sin shows up on that ward, and from here Kindred can make a play based on information that they have and that Lee Sin does not. You can look on the mini map, he doesn't have his red buff, he has 12 CS, which means blue, Gromp, and Scuttle, and so based on the timing of Lee Sin taking that Scuttle and Kindred paying attention to the mini map, it gives them time to do the blue buff, do the Gromp before heading to meet the Lee Sin at the red. Pay attention to the pathing here. Kindred does not walk the long way around. Why? Well, because if Lissandra had warded the topside river, it's highly likely that Syndra had warded the bottom side river, or someone had at least done that. And if you can see in Lee Sin's minimap, that is the case. So if Kindred wanted to go the long way around, it puts them in a precarious situation of being collapsed on. So they simply leap over the wall and meet Lee Sin at the red buff, begins the fight, secures the red buff. Lee Sin has to flash over the wall. Kindred follows by flashing, but you know the Lee Sin's got that W to safeguard, so it might not be the best idea to chase. Nevertheless, it was a worthy attempt, and Kindred is also able to steal his raptors. And now the reason Kindred didn't go for that Scuttle beforehand is because due to the 40-second respawn time on the marker, you want to wait until that mark respawns on the Scuttle before you actually end up taking it, which will guarantee you getting that first mark. However, because Lee Sin was pushed out of that side of the jungle and probably went to his top side to do wolves, which of course we can see he did, Kindred can suppose that. Kindred then moves straight on down to the bottom side because the enemy bot is hard pushing and engaged in a skirmish with Kindred's bot lane. The Thresh is actually already dead, but fortunately the top lane Urgot is paying attention to the minimap, uses his TP, and they're able to secure 2 more kills. So this is really an amazingly good early game for a Kindred. If you can get a mark in the Scuttle, which they do after the gank here, you can push the enemy Lee Sin off of his jungle and take 2 camps including a buff. You get a gank on the bot lane plus some kills. It's a really strong showing, and the idea is now that you try and get to that 4 mark power spike that gives you upgrade to your abilities, as well as keep the pressure on the Lee Sin. And not only that, but because the Thresh won't be needed in the bottom lane given that the skirmish just happened and everyone's dead, including his own ADC who had to go back, he's roamed to the mid lane from the top side, so Kindred can assist with that after taking the Scuttle and get a kill on the Syndra. It's a nice hook, it's a nice group effort, and boom, another kill. Literally the best possible early game you can want as a jungler, and Kindred also got 2 marks because they did mark the Gragas on the bottom lane when they roamed down for that gank. However, Lee Sin also plays this very well because he took his wolves, went back to base, and now he comes down to the bottom side, he gets his Krugs for that golden XP boost, and because the Thresh went mid lane and can be seen going back, it means that the Misfortune, being an immobile ADC, Gragas, Lee Sin, and Kai'Sa can easily take her out underneath the tower. Misfortune uses her flash well to try and at least survive or get other sums burned by the enemy. Lee Sin misses his Q, which forces the Kai'Sa to use her heal, but nonetheless, at least they're able to tower dive. And if you're the Misfortune, this is going to be a recurring thing in this game, pay attention to the location of the enemy. You also have to be able to read the map. I know ADC mains like to not do that, but paying attention to what the jungle and support wants to do in terms of the rest of the map is very important in how you handle your own lane. And so Kindred, now knowing Lee Sin had to go back to base and having done their own first buy already, means, well, look, that mark in the Gromp is spicy, it's just come up, I can just sneak in there and take it, right? Well, the most tilting thing known to all Kindred mains happens. Yes, the Tom Ken just rotated from top lane and gets the last hit on the mark, which means not only do you not get the Gromp, you don't get the mark, the Lee Sin shows up, and now you're dead, which is the most frustrating thing ever. But at the same time, you have to pay attention to the fact that the Urgot is pushed in, won't be able to help you. The Lissandra is neutral with Syndra in lane and won't be able to help you. It is a bit unfortunate and unlucky, but at the same time, the play did have a chance of going wrong, which it did. And while Kindred is off the map, Lee Sin can then go and try and exert his own pressure to get a bit more lane advantage that they would have lost in the early game thanks to the Kindred and Thresh ganks. He goes mid lane and they're able to pick up a kill on the Lissandra, just about. It's really odd looking and a bit messy, but she is dead. Kindred now respawns and heads directly towards the mid lane and goes to try find the Lee Sin, who's a level down and a little bit low in HP, along with a Syndra who won't be able to help as easily. The problem is the Gragas being a good support. Remember, supports, you have to think a little bit like a jungler in the way you play, especially in terms of back timings and things like that. He immediately rotates up as soon as Kindred shows on the map. Lee Sin tries to hug the wall as tight as possible, knowing he's going to need to ward jump out of that situation. And great flash body slam, both our heroes die. So it's not exactly the best outcome for either of them, and it's quite a messy early game at this point. Kindred, I think, got a little bit overconfident from the beginning and is now making questionable plays instead of being a bit safer. However, despite that horrible early start, the Lee Sin has done quite well. Apart from a few misreads on the map, he's made some good decisions. However, this next one is not really a bad decision, more of, shall we just say, negligence. His Syndra was back, coming into the mid lane. Lissandra has now gone MIA because she had that priority. Kindred can see, and everyone can see, that the blue buff is spawning. There's also Scuttle that is spawned on the top side. So without any concern whatsoever to the Scuttle, or perhaps placing defensive wards just in case of a Lissandra Kindred invade, he just starts at the blue and tries to, get it away quickly. But at this MMR, you have to assume the enemy team kind of knows what's going on, and they invade and grab a kill. Lissandra does make the heads up play overall, but Kindred is the beneficiary and Lee Sin just gets put further behind. Now, the Lee Sin will be forced to go to his red buff once he respawns because there's nothing left on the top side, which means Kindred can fall back to Krugs and red buff and be in the most opportune position to gank and save the beautiful champion known as Urgot from the giant Gromp who has gained sentience. And also, despite the ultimate, shows how I'm so happy more people don't play him top lane, because good grief. But nonetheless, Kindred manages to pick up a kill, but because of revealing themselves up there, Lee Sin knows it's safe to go for a tower dive on the bottom lane. Again, Misfortune won't have a flash up yet. It's an easy dive. He doesn't really have to do too much, just sort of safeguard, provide some shields, give that support, and then they can focus on the first tower gold. Clearly, his bot lane is winning naturally by themselves, despite the early pressure from the Kindred and the Urgot. But Lee Sin's tower dive early on, burning Misfortune's flash, his presence here again, has really impacted that bottom lane a bit more than that early pressure from Kindred and Urgot. And as I'm sure you can see, there's a huge, long, drawn-out skirmish on the bottom side with Lissandra and Kindred roaming down after that first tower, everyone moving everywhere, trying to get kills and clean up as much as possible. It ends up with Lee Sin and Kindred both dying, and so then we can sort of focus on, well, the early game phase is sort of coming to an end. It's a little early, but it's still coming to the end, because with that first tower gold, I see this way too often. Bot lanes just go back to the bot lane, so incessantly pushing it up to the second tier without any ward coverage, which gives the enemy team the ability to collapse on you, kill you, and you lose all the gold gains you actually had. So in this case, it's a good example of what to do as a jungler and a bot lane. After this long drawn out skirmish happens, the bot lane moves to the top side, and guess what Lee Sin does? Because he took his red and Krugs, he mirrors the bot lane up to the top side. The Misfortune also doesn't respect the fact that the Gragas is most likely going to be there with the Kaiser, and she gets dove and killed, which means Lee Sin can move up even more securely to take Krugs and support his bottom lane from there. So while Kindred does get to farm up and take control of the bottom side, Lee Sin's team is focusing the objective game. And here's just a good note for junglers upon reading the map. The Misfortune is clearly tilted, making bad decisions. She's gonna come to that top lane again and just blindly push, thinking that everyone has taken the tower and retreated. However, there's no vision control on the river, and you have to assume the Lee Sin's gonna collapse on you. Now, as the Kindred, you notice that your Krugs are gone. Don't leave that area. You see the Misfortune pushing, you know it's gonna bait someone in, and you are decently fed. You have your stacks, you have items from the early game, you can still make an impact in a 2v1 play. But instead, Kindred decides to roam towards the mid lane. The Lee Sin goes top, basically one-shots and kicks the Misfortune out of the game. And it's not a certainty, but maybe Kindred could have turned the play around, or at least deterred any sort of full-on engage by the Lee Sin. Now the Lee Sin gets to take that farm, push up the top wave into the tower, while Kindred has gone to the mid lane, and they actually lose the 3v3 skirmish. The problem is the Urgot can easily rotate up and the Lee Sin can rotate down. So a bunch of blown ultimates later, Kindred, Gragas, people die, Lee Sin hits a Q on Lissandra, his mind says no, but his body says yes, he goes in, he gets the kill, he gives Misfortune a kill back. It's just basically an all-around messy skirmish, but the towers have been taken by Lee Sin's team, and now they need to focus on taking down that mid lane tower, because once you have the mid down and the side waves crashing into the second tiers, against the enemy, you can now spread out, take control of their jungles, and work upon closing out the game. Now in a case like this, you have to cut your losses, so Kindred's team has a decision to make. Do we give up this middle lane tower and try and sort of bend but not break our defense? Or do we just sit mid and let the Tomkins take the bottom lane? Now, you don't want to lose a tier 2 tower for a mid lane tower that's going to fall anyway in the next few minutes. So what Kindred does is rotate to the bottom lane to help the Lissandra who's losing 1v1. They combine to take out the Tomkins, and of course Lee Sin's team now with 4 in the mid lane will immediately push and take that tower and then try and get a tier 2 because they have the 4v3 advantage. However, Lee Syndrome strikes again and he hits a Q on that misfortune before just going completely ham. Yes, she flashes, yes he gets exhausted, but he dies and they lose their pressure that they had. They now have 2 people off the map. Kindred rotates from the bottom side, is able to use the red smite and her spells to take out the Syndra, and the Gragas being Gragas kind of slows the chase down on the Kaiser, but nonetheless, Kindred's team loses a tower, but more importantly, they get the enemy team to go back, they get to push the minion waves out to get some reprieve, they can ward up their jungle, Kindred can clear camps, and they sort of sustain minimal losses in a situation where it looked like they might lose more. Now obviously, because of this, Lee Sin can respawn and go take that Herald, as Kindred's team will not be in position to help whatsoever. So once that's happened, the Kaiser is in the mid lane, deep pushing that wave. Kindred's team can then collapse on the top side because Lee Sin's team has made the bad decision of not really grouping or having a unified idea of what they want to do next, and it's a bit of a messy fight, but Kindred is doing DPS on the side, keeping their positioning very nicely. They have an Urgot, they have a Lissandra, they do have CC to use, and they're able to win that skirmish. Kaiser wasn't even involved, and that's the kind of thing you want to avoid. Every time that happens, you lose the lead that you had, and you give the enemy team time to scale back into the game and get control of the map again, or even push towers. And as you see, Kindred's team spam pinging towers and waves. They want to immediately push everything out. What Kindred does instead though is takes control of their jungle, goes into Lee Sin's jungle to take the blue, to take the grump. Misfortune can take the top tower, Lissandra can take the mid tower. That's a absolute huge gold swing just because of a few bad decisions and a few positional misplays. However, when you are Kindred's team in this situation, you've just had a good gold swing. None of that gold you've just gotten has been spent. The enemy team has just spent their most recent gold and they still had the lead at this current item state in the game. So you setting a trap in the bush is all very good, but you don't have the itemization advantage. You also have the problem that if you lose this fight, you lose everything you just gained. You don't have that gold reset as it's called. Misfortune's also going back on Krugs, and then Kindred baits their entire team into a fight, wastes the ultimate, manages to escape thanks to a Lee Sin kick, but now the rest of your team is 3v5. Well, they're not going to win that. Nothing of great value was lost, and after this play, there's a large period of inaction, of both teams not really wanting to make that crucial fight, because the team that wins it will probably take Baron and push towers, perhaps inhibs. So in this case, Kindred is farming a lot and actually stays out for a very long time without buying. Lee Sin's team sees this and actually tries to sneak a Baron. They're able to stop that Baron at least, forcing the enemy team to go back, which gives Kindred the time to steal Lee Sin's camps, take a dragon, at least hold out, get themselves fed, let their team trying to stall out until they can get a fight with a nice engage where they can actually win it and take a Baron. The problem here, and this is when it comes to your sort of mid to late game transition making, which we're not going to talk too much about, but if you're the support, if you're the jungler and you suspect they're on the Baron, don't go face check a bush behind the red buff, especially if it's dark. You need to use your blue trinket to investigate before you face check that, because guess what? Oh look, it's a death rush. Now you're down a person. Now the last thing you want to do as well as that team in that situation is continue the fight. You're 4v5, you're already in a sort of neutral game where you kind of don't have the objective pressure, and well, now everyone's dead and they get a free Baron. And basically now you've entered the full late stages of the game. One team as Baron can push inhibs, and it's all about how you play defensively, how you withstand their pressures and win team fights to come back into the game. We won't actually show it, but that is actually what happens. Because Kindred scales so well versus the enemy team comp, you still have a Lissandra, you're able to win multiple team fights in a row, but it takes them, another 10 minutes to do so. Okay, so hopefully you can learn a little bit about Kindred versus Lee Sin in that matchup and how Kindred can path to their advantage to take care of business in the early game, get marks, get fed, and also hopefully you learn from the Lee Sin's perspective. If you lose your buff, if you get invaded, you can still make game-changing plays that allow your team to get an objective lead and win the mid game. It's not always about being 3-buffed or being invaded at level 4. Those things don't matter if you're going to make the right macro play that actually lets you win the game. Thank you very much for watching this Gameplay Monday video. Please like, share, and comment if you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe for more League of Legends guides coming soon. Please consider joining to officially support the channel, become a member with access to perks. And as always, I will see you all in the next tutorial.